Neurodiverse students thrive with predictability. They thrive when there's a schedule, a routine, something that they're familiar with. Going from elementary school where you have one little safe class to middle school, that is chaos. The 3 Ps: planning, predictability, and previewing, so that you have a set way of being able to go into an environment with confidence.
Kids are naturally resilient. They'll just adjust to school transitions on their own.
I wish I would be out of a job if that were the case, which would be okay by me.
Changing schools for any child can be really stressful, but Cadence has autism spectrum disorder as well as ADHD, and now she's on a campus with 500 kids.
At my old school, there were too many students. It made me feel nervous. It was too hard for me to learn.
It was so heartbreaking for me to know that it would be difficult for Cadence to navigate that type of environment. And every day I would drop her off holding my breath and just pray to God that she would survive.
In this episode of Learning Differently, we talk with Shayna Abram about why transitions can be especially tough for students with learning, social, or emotional differences, and what adults can do to make them not just manageable, but empowering. You'll hear practical tools like previewing and routine setting, learn how to spot emotional distress during times of change, and explore what it looks like to help a student move forward without fear. Because behind every transition is a student who needs to know they won't be left behind. Today, we're joined by Shayna Abram, the founder of Prepare to Bloom, a therapeutic consulting practice dedicated to empowering neurodiverse students and their families through transitions and trauma-informed support. Shayna brings deep expertise in helping students build emotional resilience, develop self-advocacy, and find belonging inside and outside the classroom. Shayna, welcome to the show. So sometimes we think of transitions as big moments, like for our students, moving to a new school is a big transition, or even starting high school. But even small changes like switching teachers or classrooms can really throw a student off balance. So from your perspective, what are some of the most common transitions that tend to be challenging for students?
I think you named a few of them. Obviously, there's the big ones, moving from elementary to middle school to high school. There's also the small ones, when a friend moves away, when there's a teacher that, has a child and they're on maternity leave. That can feel really disruptive for some of these kids. There's also things that are happening at home, whether parents are divorcing or there's a loss of a pet. Those can all be really dysregulating for kids. And even though the things that are happening at home, we all know that trickles right into the classroom.
So what do you think it is that makes it so difficult with school transitions, especially for neurodiverse students?
So neurodiverse students thrive with predictability. They thrive when there's a schedule, a routine, something that they're familiar with, when there's people and places and things that they expect the same reactions and response from. So when you have any of these transitions, what becomes really difficult is all of that is stripped away. And so to build in some of that, you will see their brains calm down. You will see them be able to kind of recalibrate to a new setting.
And we would love to talk about that just a little bit further, because Mike and I have both talked about the importance of predictability and previewing, even for students who are struggling with transitions. So how, as a parent, do you know what your child needs?
That is the $1 million question. Part of it, I think, is asking your child, learning from what are previous behaviors, right? Where did they thrive? Where did they do well? What were the commonalities in those settings? Was it something where they had a teacher that would forecast, hey, on Monday, we always do whatever the assignment is? Or somebody that was able to look at the types of learning styles that the child has and mirror their teaching style to that. I think some of the other things can just be knowing that you're going to have a go-to person, whether it's in the classroom or in the school, that person that you go to when you're not feeling great. Could be a friend, it could be a teacher, it could be an administrator, but having those resources built in, and I love what you said, right? Previewing. However you can help bring some of that, that's going to calm all of those things that are going on in their brains so that they can attend to whatever the tasks are that are being asked.
And an example of that I just want to share really quickly because I saw this done by one of our teachers at Fusion. So she knew that her student struggled with transitions, and she recorded herself. And she recorded the classroom, her individual classroom, and gave her a preview of, I remember, the homework cafe at the time.
Love that.
And I remember the family coming in and talking about what a difference that made for their daughter who had some anxiety about this big transition to a new school, but having a familiar face, having the warmth come across of understanding what the needs were and previewing it, just that little step meant a lot to her on her first day of school.
Absolutely. I think knowing that you have somebody there that knows you is going to make a world of difference, and that you have the ability to kind of go in knowing and trusting the environment.
So we just talked a little bit about the school side of things, of what schools can do possibly. But what about the families? How can they start prepping a student for a transition?
I think that previewing piece is also available for families. So talking about when you go to your new school, you're going to have a change of classes, or you're going to have a teacher whose name is whatever it is, right? Having that ability to talk about what's going to be different, and at the same time, keeping the home routines as much the same as can possibly be done, right? Some of that's not realistic. If you're going to a new school and there's new times that things happen, then that's going to change the times. But what are the other things that can stay the same? At 5 o'clock, we always have dinner. At 7 o'clock, we get ready for bed. But that way, there's more predictability outside of the school and where those transitions and changes are happening. And that allows for there to be a little bit more of that anxious energy to be placed in a different area.
So, Shayna, how can parents who know that their child is challenged with transitions weigh sort of the social emotional impact of that change and decide if the change is what I would say is worth it? Like, is it worth the cost of what my child might experience in this shift?
I think that that's a really hard question. And I think that for families to weigh that cost benefit analysis in the moment, the people that I would talk to about this, if your child is old enough and developmentally able to do it, talk with them. See what they're thinking and feeling and how they're doing with it. Talk with their treatment team. So if they have a therapist, if they have a coach, if they have a clergy, if they have a friend of a parent of a friend, there we go.
Yeah.
that knows them really well, right? How are they showing up in these other areas? That's also going to be a really good indicator. And then with that transition, what are they doing as far as their eating, their sleeping? Are they showing you signs that there's distress that may not be something that they can articulate? And that's going to be a pretty good indicator. The other thing is know that there's time for transition. And so
it's a part of everyday life as a human being.
And it can take time. So not, if you have a bad day, week, even month, it may still be worth it. It's just going to be a matter of having those conversations and what is the greater good, right? What is the reason that you initiated that move in the first place? Because coming back to that bigger goal may also give you some indicators of whether whatever the change is working or not.
So can we dive a little bit deeper there? So how do we know when a student is really struggling with that transition? I mean, going beyond first day jitters, first week jitters.
I look at some of the physiological pieces, right? Are they sleeping the way that they would before this transition happened? Are they eating that way? Have they made friends, or are they attempting to make friends? Sometimes it's not the easiest thing, particularly for the neurodiverse kids that we work with. I'm also looking at who are the friends, who are the folks that they're reaching out to, because that's usually a pretty good indicator of how they're feeling about themselves. So if they're gravitating towards folks that you're kind of going, not sure about these, these friends, that can be an indication of a conversation to have. How are you feeling? What's going on? And then on the flip side, right, if you're seeing some of these things calm down, then that can be an indication that things are going well and that you really do, this change has created the type of impact that you're hoping for.
And Shayna, in the classroom, what does this transition, this challenge with transitions look like? What is it often masked as?
Bad behavior.
Bad behavior.
I think a lot of times when we start hearing about a student who's acting out, it really is an indication of something greater that needs to be looked at. Is there anxiety? Are they shutting down? Are they avoiding because they don't know how to express it in a different way? I'm a really big believer that we do the best we can, all of us, parents included, kids included. And so if we're seeing something and it's being labeled as bad behavior, I want to go back and look at when did it start? What are some of the other indicators that are going on? Do we have, whether it's a transition, like a school transition, a medication transition, what are the other factors going on? Because like I said, I believe these kids are doing the best they can.
That's a beautiful, I think, very empathic way to connect with your child, is to start first with that belief, is that they're doing the best that they can, and then go from there.
In high school, right? In high school, there's almost a seasonality to the school year, right? And especially for freshmen, that's a little bit difficult to navigate, right? You get the first days, you have orientation, then you kind of settle in your classes. What about the transitions that can be somewhat hidden? Like, hey, now the teachers are kicking it into full gear. Now we're in final exams. Now everybody's really looking forward to winter break and they can't stand being in school. Same for spring break, things like that. Tell me a little bit about those transitions, and especially how do we serve our neurodiverse kids?
It's a really good question. I don't think about the seasonality as much as I probably should, because I think of the whole year and that's just where I live. But I think when it comes to those transitions, again, it's a matter of where can we keep things scheduled the same, right? So you're on spring break. We know that there's going to be some flexibility in your schedule. You're not going to school the same way. But there may still be the same kind of limitations around screen time or around bedtime or around we're going to go and have fun, but we're always going to have dinner together as a family. So in those areas where there can, again, be predictability, be structure, have some supported times where that can feel quote unquote normal or the same, so that the parts that are going to naturally ebb and flow aren't going to trigger as much of that bigger response. And also embracing the inevitability of it, right? There's chaos. When we get to the end of a school year, this is a big time where there's a lot of just unstructured time. And so being able to take a step back as a family and accept that's going to happen.
Right now, as we're recording, this is the middle of June, right? And I think as an educator, I'm thinking as a parent and as an educator, I kind of dread those weeks leading up to the end of summer and transitioning into fall. And you just talked about, maintaining some of those routines. But what if things have gone all out of whack in the summer?
I think, again, this is a time where start ahead, right? Predictability, planning, previewing. So are there ways that you can, even if it's 2 weeks or 2 days before the start of school, start getting back to that sleep schedule that you know that they're going to need to be on when school starts again? You're obviously not going to do homework in the middle of June, but are there other things that can be built into a schedule that look like homework, right? So a summer job, or having something where maybe as a family we're going to all, turn in our phones and we're all going to read for half an hour every day. But where there's those opportunities as a family to really build some of that structure back sooner than later, obviously is going to help. But even if it's 2 days before school starts, I think you'll see a big impact by starting to get this, the sleep and the eating and the timing.
I just want to say that you heard it here first, that Shayna is suggesting that all parents assign their kids homework during the summer.
Please don't.
Well, and Mike, when we were talking the other day, you shared a student story that you were working with a family who previewed the route to school. Right?
Yeah.
How powerful that was, because I think you mentioned that student was in the transition of summer, right? So they were going from a more structured environment to more or unstructured, and then some of the practices, some of the things that the family put in place really helped.
I'm just thinking about like the anxiety that comes up, whether neurotypical or neurodiverse, right? The anxiety, the fear of the unknown, and us as parents being able to model, not only what that bus route might be, especially this family lived in the city. And so it was connecting a couple of different buses to get to where they needed to in Chicago, right? But then I'm thinking not only doing that with the child so that they feel safe and then they know which stop they should be at, but what if you also leveled it up to the point where you could walk that child through, hey, listen, like this bus might be running late and there might be alternative routes. This is my first step in problem solving. I'm going to pull out my phone, pull up Google Maps, and then make sure that I have another alternate plan or route planned.
Yeah, practicing almost, well, what if it goes wrong? Or what if, it's inevitable. Something is going to happen.
I mean, this is the reason that we do fire drills, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Is so that if something does go wrong, there's muscle memory there, as opposed to making it up on the fly. And I love that example. This is something that, we're doing with my niece right now who's going into middle school is, how are you going to get there? And if that doesn't work, then how else are you going to get there? So she has a couple of alternatives and she's ready to go when school starts. But summer's a great time to practice that. The other thing you can do during summer, it's also a really good time. Do some of the fun things, but they still have structure. So I have a lot of my students that are learning to drive this summer because it adds something that they want. Right? They want to have their license. They want to have the freedom to go where they want to go. But it also creates some structure because you have to take the tests. You have to do the sample driving, right? You have to do certain things to get what you want.
Now, working with the neurodiverse population, do you often see that some of the transitions are harder between elementary school and middle school through high school just by the design of what the classes look like?
Absolutely. I think going from elementary school where you have one little safe class to middle school, that is chaos. And when you're trying to change classes and you have to know what to put in your backpack and you have to know, what you're going to do and where you're going to be and who you're going to be with, and there's a change of teachers, that's all so overwhelming. And then when you go into high school, I think the social piece of high school becomes so paramount and so much more important. You've already done all of the skill set as far as, what you need to do. You might be in a new location. It might be larger, but you know how to change classes at that point. Now it becomes about, oh my gosh, everybody's talking about me or everybody's thinking this about me. They're not. We know they're not. But in that moment, developmentally, that's exactly what somebody is going through. And so those social changes and the impact of that become so much more paramount.
Now, we talked a little bit about what parents can do, how schools could be set up so that they have previews and stuff like that. But thinking about those transitions, what can teachers specifically do? Lynna had a great example that went far beyond the call of duty to create a video, but what are some little things that might not necessarily be huge cost to teachers to be able to help their students transition?
An intro email, something that previews what the year is going to be. If there's reading assignments, if there's something that can familiarize the student with what their expectations are going to look like for that year, I think that's huge. Not everybody's going to read those emails, but those kids that need it will. I have a lot of my students that are rule followers, and they will definitely be the ones that have read the email and read probably 3 of the books that are assigned, right? They're going to be prepared that way. I think another thing is if you can send a picture, right? If you can send, you were talking about a video, which is fantastic, but even just a picture of who you are. The other thing is if you can send some kind of a bio, that makes you less of this, kind of ethereal person and more of a real person that who are you? What are some of your likes? What are the things that you that you like to do. And I think that also allows for a student who might be feeling anxious to be more grounded. And maybe there's some connection point. Hey, if your teacher's really into Magic the Gathering, cool. You can talk about that.
It's this theme that has been really reoccurring for us, throughout our series of conversations, which is connection. The importance of connection for our neurodiverse students is just, it's so, so important. And I wanted to share, I met with a family once, and the father told me, he's like, Lynna, you have to understand, Gavin is walking around as though he already has a full backpack and it's the first day of school. And he was like, it's so weighted down for him. You have to understand, he walks in the door and his backpack is full. So if you think about all these logistics, you're giving him his schedule, you're giving him this, that is just putting on more weight to the already full backpack, which is a real emotional impact for our students who are challenged with transitions. Yeah. So Shayna, I want to revisit something that you mentioned earlier about muscle memory, because I've been sort of diving into this topic of trauma. And so things are so multi-layered, again, for our neurodiverse students. And for students specifically who have experienced trauma, a change in their environment can feel really unsafe for them, right? So how do transitions sometimes in your work with families re-trigger past experiences or lead to emotional breakdowns?
So when that trauma response gets kicked in, you're no longer dealing with somebody who's in their rational mind. You're dealing with somebody who's in survival mode. And so part of whatever the trauma might be, and especially if it's happened at school, I think the difficulty is this is like, it's their job, right? So you're going there day after day after day, and it's getting wounded every single day. So your brain doesn't have the opportunity to go into a place other than survival mode. And I think for kids that already have a tough time with transitions, when you add that extra layer on, you're not working really with that student. You're working with their lizard brain, right? You're working with them in such a heightened state. And so being able to recognize that, and again, go back to what you said before, right? Where can you connect? And then help to ground them, because at that point, they need some adult to help them really to get to that more regulated state. Co-regulation is critical at that point. And I think that's where you will end up meeting who this child really is once they feel safe, once they feel secure, and then they can move out of that survival state.
Can you give us, just again, as a parent, now I'm asking, I would love some real life examples of how you can help your child co-regulate. And let's take, middle through high school, because I know, of course, it's varied across ages. My 4-year-old.
You're not going to be rocking your high school students. Hopefully. One of the things that I think we all have access to is just going outside. Sometimes if you're in a classroom, if you're in a school, and that's a place of trauma, that's a place of stress, just simply saying, hey, let's go walk outside. Being able to then identify what you're seeing. I see plants, I see the lawn, I see the pool, wherever is around you, right? That is going to bring somebody back into the moment. And then breathing, right? We know this is one of those things, especially if somebody's having a trauma response, they're likely breathing much more shallow and not breathing down into their bellies. So just, hey, can we take a couple of deep breaths together? And doing that with them so that they're mirroring what's going on for you, even if they can't access it for themselves in that moment. I think it gets a little bit more tricky if you don't know the person, because you may not know. For example, I have a student that I'm working with right now, and the word coping is a trigger. We all use the word coping all the time. And so I didn't know that when I first met him. He was thankfully able to share that with me pretty early on, but it really dysregulated him. And so had I not known that, I might be using some words, or I might be doing something that is actually triggering for that person. So the more that you can know the person, and even asking when they're in a calm state, hey, what really works to ground you? And take your lead from them, especially with your high school students, right? Likely they've talked to somebody, they've worked with somebody, they know some of these things that work for them, so that when you meet them in that dysregulated place, you have a secret arsenal to pull from.
Yeah. Love that. And I know we were joking about age group, but some of those mechanisms and skills that you introduced, I actually do with my little ones. With both of them, is like, first thing is, okay, baby, let's breathe together. Or first thing I do, I step outside with my little guy and he just calms down immediately. So good reminders.
I love the points that you brought up in terms of being able to continue predictability through routines for our kids that depend on that or need that in their lives. I think that I'm also an adult, and I know this about myself, that establishing new routines are really, really hard. And we haven't been successful as parents. My 8-year-old still needs reminders every freaking day to brush his teeth. Tell me a little bit, give me some insider tips or something. Like, how do we establish these routines in the first place? And if I'm an adult that has troubles establishing routines, how do I ensure that my kid has those routines?
I love the idea of pictures when it comes to routines, especially for 8-year-old kind of timeline, right? Your kid, I'm guessing, probably wants to be independent and at the same time still needs those reminders. So if there's a way to use a pictogram or a chart or something that can be a good reminder of, hey, when I wake up in the morning, I do, I wake up, I brush my teeth, I go to the bathroom, I wash my face, and then I eat breakfast. If you have something that is just visual up, it can be a picture of a toothbrush. It can be, or it can be one where you write the word, right? Whatever style works. But then if there's the way to move that from not done to done, that also gives them a task to complete, which can be both the reminder and then also a sense of accomplishment, right? I did this thing. And I think we all use that, right? How many reminders do you have in your phone right now? So it's a skill that is actually building on things that they will need later on in life.
I still use a checklist.
I do too.
Today. I wanted to bring up another story too of, again, we have so many students at Fusion who are challenged with transitions. And I love that we can create an environment that is so warm for them, inviting, safe. One of the things that stood out to me most this past year was actually another student who helped one of our 8th graders transition in. So she played the role of an ambassador and led. I mean, I saw this child who had so many challenges with transitions just drop her shoulders and take a breath, because this one student took the time to take her around the school, introduce her to some new friends, some new teachers. And, I just think it's a great reminder of the role that not only educators can play and parents can play, but other children can play, especially in an environment like ours where, that's a value for us at Fusion. We want everyone to feel seen and known and heard, and it translates. It translates from administration to teachers to our students.
I love that. I love the idea of having a buddy and having somebody that can totally show you the ropes and the stuff that the teachers don't know.
What about kids in school environments in which they might not have a buddy yet? Or like Fusion is very structured in that we have many of these ambassador programs. But you were saying earlier, the social challenges in that transition piece, I'm going into a new school and I know nobody. And guess what? My reaction to that is I'm just going to go eat lunch alone.
That, I think, is an opportunity both for the school to step in and create those programs, and also for the family to identify those people that are the go-to ahead of time. So whether that's with an IEP or whether that's something that you have done, if you know somebody in the neighborhood that's going to that school, right? Who are the touch points? Because likely you're going to a school that is relatively close to home, and you're going to come across somebody that has either been to that school or knows something about that school. It's a great time to use some of the older kids maybe in the neighborhood who can say, hey, I went there. I really liked this teacher, or this teacher, oh my gosh, they're a problem, right? Like, it's a great way to bring community together. If that's still not going to happen on a peer level, then it's a time to find a buddy that's an administrator or a teacher or somebody that is part of a club, right? So if there's a particular area of interest, drama is one that a lot of my students have, they'll oftentimes seek out the drama teacher, the music teacher, somebody that has that same area of passion, and that becomes their buddy.
So often on the show, we are covering specific diagnoses. Do challenges with school transitions impact some students more than others?
I would say yes. Transitions affect all of us, right? We go through multiple transitions every day. But for individuals who are on the autism spectrum, who are neurodivergent, that type of transition that naturally happens during the day can be more disruptive for their ecosystem, for their body, for all of these things. And so it can impact them more than it impacts other students that we're working with.
Shayna, what are some easy ways for parents to think about how to support their kids through times of school transitions?
So I think about the 3 Ps. Planning, so being able to create a plan for what is this transition going to look like. Previewing, so much like we've talked about, right? How can you bring them into that environment or let them know what the transition is going to look like ahead of time? And then predictability, how can you replicate that each time this thing is going to happen? So when we go to school, you're always entering into this particular classroom first. And that way you're set up and ready to go for when the next transition happens.
Now it's time to separate fiction from fact. It's time for some myth busting. All right, Shayna, you ready?
Yeah.
All right. Myth number 1. Kids are naturally resilient. They'll just adjust to school transitions on their own.
I love that. I wish I would be out of a job if that were the case, which would be okay by me. No, absolutely not. I think that this comes back to what we've been talking about this whole time. We really need to set kids up for transitions and quite frankly, everybody up for transitions better by helping them to predict what's going to happen so that they can come in feeling a sense of calm and groundedness for whatever is about to change.
All right. Myth number 2. If my kid managed a school transition last year, they can do it again.
Also, another one, I'd say absolutely not. So just because something happened once doesn't mean that it will happen the same way again. Not to mention, are there other transitions that are happening? Are you going from elementary to middle school? Are you going from middle school to high school, right? These are all big points where there is a new skill set that's being asked of the individual. So the more that we can do to help somebody be prepared for that transition, the better the outcome is going to be.
Shayna, I think you have reminded us of what can be possible for students who have challenges with transitions when care and connection meet their true individual needs. And I think that is so powerful. Thank you for being with us today. Thank you for lending all of these very helpful insights that I myself am going to put into practice right away. We have loved having you here.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been fun.
Every student learns differently, and understanding how your child learns can change everything, from their school success to everyday confidence. That's why Fusion Academy created a short quiz to help you better understand your students' learning DNA. In just a few minutes, you'll get personalized insights into your students' unique learning preferences, plus tips to better support them at home and in the classroom. Take the quiz today. It's quick, it's free, and it may just unlock your students' full potential. Visit fusionacademy.com/podcast. That's fusionacademy.com/podcast. We know learning differently requires showing up differently. So here are some tools, insights, and strategies to help. It's time for Real Talk, Real Tools. For neurodiverse students, school changes, new grades, new environments, new routines can feel like walking into chaos. But with the right support, transitions don't have to derail learning. In traditional school settings, previewing is powerful. When students know what to expect, what the classroom looks like, who their teacher is, how the day flows, they feel more in control. Try this. Before a big transition, ask school if your child can do a preview visit. Even 10 minutes to meet a teacher or walk through the hallways can reduce anxiety. Also, request a visual schedule or written plan for the first week. Predictability builds trust, and trust unlocks readiness.
Lynna, the first day of school for any kid is hard. I think change, period, is hard for kids or for adults. But when we talk about specifically the neurodiverse population, change is extra, extra hard. I'm not just thinking about the change from elementary school to middle school to high school, but I'm thinking about the families that have to make that tough decision to change schools completely, perhaps out of district, right? And I'm thinking about how we can make that easier on kids. And also, what are the justifications that a family has to make to do that cost-benefit analysis of changing schools completely?
Yeah, so it's like you're saying, how do they know when it's bad enough that it's worth making that risk, taking that risk to make the transition?
Yeah, people don't make changes unless things suck bad enough.
Yeah, that does remind me of a student that we served a few years ago where, he had such a hard time even coming into school, and he would be out in the parking lot. And, we're, of course, the flexible environment that we are. And so our first assumption was not that he's lazy, first of all, which was so, I think, an impactful move for us as an administrative team, is to think about him and his abilities. So we made an adjustment. We, as an administrative team, went out to the parking lot. We said, hey, bud, here's your schedule today. This is what it's going to look like. And we did a little bit of previewing for him, again, without the assumption that he's just lazy and just doesn't want to come in. And so that, I think, really changed everything for him. It unlocked his feeling of comfort, and he was able to walk through those doors.
I think that story perfectly highlights what the adults have to do, how they have to connect and understand the needs of that child to be able for that kid to take that leap of faith that everything is going to be okay.
So when Cadence was in 4th grade, her classroom was 35 students. There was absolutely no way a teacher would be able to see her, let alone help her. But at Fusion, she had an environment where it was one-to-one. She had a teacher know exactly who she was, and she was able to soar.
I felt a bit stressed out when there were like 30 kids at my old school. It was a little bit too overwhelming, too loud. But I prefer one-on-one because it was a lot easier for me and less stress.
Fusion changed everything for Cadence because she fully embraced how much she matters. She was able to fully see that she is such a wonderful soul. Every time she would go into school, she just lit up the room, and she was able to be her true self.
When I graduated from Fusion, I felt so happy and proud.
I can't even believe she has a high school diploma. It just brings me so much joy. And the world is at her fingertips now, and we really have to thank Fusion for setting up that foundation for her. She wouldn't be where she is today if it wasn't for Fusion. She wouldn't be the ray of sunshine that she is. And I'm really proud of her, and I really am thankful that a place like Fusion exists.
And now, my favorite part of the show, where the numbers, the neuroscience, and the public policy intersect. It's time for the Research Roundup. Just one big one for me today. It's a study by Dr. Tobin and their colleagues. They published in the Journal of Autism and Developmental Disorders, showing that students with autism or ADHD have a particularly difficult time with school transitions and display increased anxiety and behavioral disruptions. These transitions, they're just simply harder for some kids than others. And it's why predictability, previewing, and planning are so essential for reducing transition-related distress and improving both attendance and engagement.
I think it's such important information for our parents to hear, Mike, because if your child has autism or ADHD, and if their transitions feel chaotic, I think it's really important for us to recognize for our parents it is not a failure. It is a real researched back challenge that they are experiencing. But there is good news. There are tools that we can put in place. I noted down visual schedules, orientation visits, even, consistent morning routines. They can really, I think, soften those transitions and build confidence over time for our students who are challenged with this.
Yeah, and hopefully those supports help kids realize, change can be okay, and they've got a whole entire support team behind them.
Thanks so much for joining us on Learning Differently. We're grateful that you're here doing the work, asking the questions, and showing up for the students who need it most. Supporting learners who think and experience the world differently takes curiosity, care, and corazón, heart. Because when we understand how they learn,
we unlock who they can become.
We will see you next time.